So I'm Trisha Gupta. I'm a freelance columnist and journalist based in Delhi. And Abhay Kumar is a documentary filmmaker who says that I can't call him a documentary filmmaker maybe because he hasn't made a film in 5 years, but we will let this be for the moment and continue to insist that he is a filmmaker. We're here to talk about his film Placebo, which is currently streaming free on the DIFF viewing room. And this is part of what's called the DIFF Talks series, which is something that the Dharamshala International Film Festival people are doing, a series of conversations with filmmakers and film professionals. So Abhay, thank you very much for joining us. He's in Amsterdam and I'm in Delhi. So this has taken a little bit of time coordination and other such things. And it's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for taking out the time.
So Abhay, I'm going to ask you about a film which you made quite a while ago. Just by way of slightly more introduction, I'm just going to add that Abhay graduated from the Xavier's Institute of Communication in Mumbai, and in 2011 he made an animated short film, Just That Sort of a Day, which was shown at Busan and Chicago, among other places, and also became the first Indian animation to compete in the Tribeca Film Festival in New York. And since then he's made Placebo, which we'll be talking about in some more detail. He makes films in partnership with Archana Phadke, and their last production together was the documentary About Love, and also exquisite film that I saw at DIFF last year, which Archana directed and Abhay produced. In the case of Placebo, the film we're here to talk about, which was finished in 2015, is that right?
Yeah.
Archana... 2014. So Archana was, for this, she was in the producer role and Abhay is in the director role. And Placebo won the National Award for the Best Investigative Documentary and traveled to several festivals worldwide, winning awards at Hot Docs in Toronto and at Amsterdam. And in fact, Amsterdam is where Abhay is currently doing a master's in cinema through artistic research at the Netherlands Film Academy. And so I'm going to start, because we want to stay with Placebo. Let's start with Placebo and we'll maybe come back to Amsterdam and other things soon. So, so Placebo is an unusual film in terms of, in many ways, I think. And the first of those, I think, is that a word that you've used and other writers and interviewers have used for it, an undercover documentary where you stayed for or spent nearly 2 years on the AIMS campus. And it begins with you visiting your brother, who is then a student there, and then an injury that your brother sustains, and then him leaving the hostel and you actually seemingly stepping into his room or his stead and sort of making connections on campus and trying to sort of immerse yourself in the world of the AIMS medical student, or what is it that made you want to do it? In the film, the decision seems really spontaneous. Was it really like that, or was this something that you thought about before? How did you decide to do this?
Well, I think it was, I have to jog my memory about this. As far as I remember, because my brother was recovering in the ICU and was spending a lot of time in the hospital, I had started this process already to just talk to people to recreate the incidents of that night as to what happened. Right? So it was not that I was thinking of making a film. It was also for my understanding, for my parents' understanding, because it was such a bizarre incident for somebody like my brother who's never been in a fight or been in a violent situation. That where did this come from? Because, you know, if it's a simple accident where somebody does something to you, you can understand it. But it was like this moment which happened, right? And it sort of changed his life. And in that point, we weren't even sure how this would change his life. So it was quite an intense time. And yeah, so for me, it was just simply a process of just going out and finding out what happened. And what started to, I think, lay the seeds of a deeper project was the fact that the sort of coincidences which started manifesting, which sort of, for example, I bumped into Kay, who had punched a glass window the previous year, right? So there's a sort of a very organic way as to why these characters became important, or we became close as friends even. and then how he introduces me to Chopra, and then which it's the first time actually happens on camera when there K introduces me to this guy,
So
and so yeah,
that is an actual moment when you're meeting
yeah.
Chopra, right? Yeah. These
I
are
mean, I
all
met
names
him
of
before.
students for our viewers.
No, no, I'd met him before,
Ah, right.
but never seen him as a as somebody who'd be part of this, because he was not linked directly to this incident.
Right.
So yeah, so it almost like this process. I do remember also that I told Archana that, okay, I'm going to, I have to spend time here because Sahil, my brother, would need help, and that my presence here is important. And then I had to give myself a reason also, what do I do while I'm here? So it wasn't that I was trying to make a film about it. It was more about me just trying to find out, and then also spending a lot of time with these guys as friends, getting to know each other, because I think the kind of intimacy which the film achieves is not just a product of question and answers, like me, making them sit down and asking, what do you feel about this? What do you feel about that? I actually recently saw the film again because I had to show it at school to my classmates, and I was quite surprised by how oblique the conversations are. Like, it's hardly ever um, a straightforward, like each scene is sort of giving something or revealing a truth in a very oblique way. It's never at face value. So I was quite surprised by the nature of also the choices which then I made, or me and Archana made, to keep those particular scenes. It was quite strange actually to watch it. So yeah, so this
It's
process
certainly
was,
very intimate. The conversations feel like you've had a lot of conversations. You know, that comes through quite strongly, and I think that's what makes it. Yeah, I don't know if I would say oblique, but certainly there's layers in there. It's wo nahi hai ki, you got there and you were like, तो आप बताइए. You do, even though when you're asking that question, you do ask the question to at least 2 or 3 of these people, why do you want to be a doctor? Which is a question that could be asked by a filmmaker walking in with a mic. But the answers themselves have a certain texture. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess the obvious question that I have, which maybe you've answered many times before, but I was struck by the choice of, first of all, you're choosing particular people. There are obviously many students in a medical hostel, even in the hostel that you're in, and they all, the particular people that you choose do make the film. I mean, K, I suppose, is the most intriguing and most an unusual thinking person. Let me
that would be an understatement.
Yeah, but I mean, so did you spend a lot of time with lots of other people and pick these ones for the eventual film?
I mean, it was very clear very soon who the main characters would be. I obviously segued into multiple branches. I remember following K and a bunch of different people to places in the hills. Went to Ladakh to shoot because, this film was supposed to be a very different film from, and that's the most obvious thing to say, obviously. When you start a documentary, you want to make something, and then, but it was different to an extent that part of the film was supposed to be set in space on a space station.
Okay.
And the story was based on a short story K had written. And then the film would eventually come back to, so think of a fiction film embedded in a non-fiction narrative. So that's the amount of deviation
that you planned for, but also
we planned for, but obviously I didn't know the events which would happen, which eventually happened, and these were conversations with Archana where I learned a lot, in the sense, because Archana has a bit of industry experience, which I don't have. Like, she assisted Deepa Bhatia and Amol Gupte on Stanley Gadaba. So, I mean, there's a lot of respect and knowledge which sort of trickled down also from there. Like, Deepa ma'am also kind of became consulting editor on our film, and eventually. So this idea of a responsibility of to the narrative. So one is my idea, which is like my playground, right? Like that's what I want to do. I want to play. But then when you're doing nonfiction, in its crudest sense, the events are also dictating the approach you should take. So these were a lot of, so I think the first full version of the film which was made was not hybrid at all. It was a film which already worked. So for Archana, the film was done. And that was the cut we were already sending to festivals. But then I kind of realized it wasn't the film I wanted to make. So that went into the dumps completely. So film which already worked was sidelined, and an entire new hybrid language was brought in.
So when you say the hybrid language was sorry, I'm cutting in to ask, when you say the hybrid language was brought in later, do you mean all the animation sequences as well as the special effects sort of things, the things with those mice, all those sorts of things?
Everything.
I see.
Everything.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. So then how what did you do with the straightforward, more I don't know,
like the fly on the wall cut? I mean, yeah, it's still there somewhere. I was trying to find it. I don't have it right now in Amsterdam. It's probably somewhere, one of my older drives in India. So I was telling Archu that, yeah, we should, the thing is, like, okay, so one thing which has been happening.
Several other films out of it, given that I read that it had, you had like, how many hours of footage?
Around 900 to 1000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like a fantastic archive to play with at some other point, maybe.
Yeah, it's something which has come up at school as well, because at the masters, archiving is something which is spoken about a lot, and which also made me realize that our understanding of archives in India is so basic and limited. Like an archive is something you dump. An archive is not something which is alive in itself, and that's something which a notion I was introduced to here, because there's a lot of respect and kind of effort done in archiving organization, which, I mean, it would have been great if I understood it when I was doing Placebo, because I just like dumped everything, never to be opened again. But why I bring this up is because actually there's a lot of people on YouTube, and now that the film has come on the DIFF platform, they've been asking for the Pratik Kaur song at the end of the film. Like, I get like mails about it, like, where's the song? Where can we find it? And I was trying to find the song, just a clean version of the song which I can put online. I found it, so I'm going to be putting that out soon now, finally.
Well, even more reasons for, and slightly less bleak reasons for watching Placebo.
Yeah, it's such a happy song.
Yeah, I mean, that's fabulous, actually. Yeah, I did notice that, and I was going to ask you about the music. But so one sec. So the archive thing is interesting, actually. The idea of many cuts, and you were talking earlier, just before this conversation, the off-camera conversation about how editing, you feel, is in some ways, for documentary in particular, for nonfiction in particular, the making of the film. I mean,
Absolutely.
So yeah, that certainly. I mean, I don't know, because I haven't seen the other versions, but there's something about this film that certainly feels like, yeah, I get, like I said, like the sense that these conversations are some among many, and that there are certain kinds of shorthand that you can only have with people that you've been talking with for a long time, and that time, that sense of time spent together does very much come through, especially with Kay. In your conversations with Kay, I get the sense that he's gesturing to this time spent together, and yeah, that provides a certain density. Yeah, I guess it's a totally intriguing character for people who haven't seen this film. It may seem like we're talking about some I don't know, some master villain or something, also with this just K. Yeah, and then at the end of the film, we learn that he sort of disappeared, and you're no longer in touch with him. And I'm afraid to ask, actually, in so many years down the road, whether you've heard from him again.
No, of course. I heard from him, I think, a year after the film was done. Actually, I'm sure he's watching this somewhere. I don't know. And
again, you make him seem a little bit otherworldly. Like,
he is. I mean, he is and he's not. Yeah, but it's also, yeah, it's just everything feels like a remnant. Like it almost feels vulgar to even unravel. It was such an intense time, and yeah, he showed up a bit later. Like there was a period where nobody knew where he was, and everybody was trying to sort of find him, and then he needed his own time, whatever he was doing. Um, I don't know what he was doing, but he was just away, I guess. And he has his own reasons and his own style how to do it. And but he's fine and he's safe and he's doing well.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. I'm actually somewhat. I think I don't know. Maybe most people who watch the film might be a little bit invested in what happens today.
I mean, that's possibly one of the first questions which I always get.
And you've left it there, that little. We don't know where he is. So
Yeah, I mean, when the film was done, that was what it was.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then it took a while before, before contact was made again.
So, moving from this intensely personal way in which the film was made, and it totally comes through, and I think the power of it in some ways is that, and that comes through even in your use of animation or anything. But I'm going to go to both kinds of sort of systemic things that we can that it also leads us in the direction of. The first of which is the education system in some ways, and there is a sense very much that this film is about a kind of unacknowledged crisis of Indian education. It's not so much that we don't have bright students, because obviously we do, but also how brightness is measured and how we decide to tick that box and send people off as if they've, I don't know, as if they've got to the moon or something, ki aims pahunch gaye hain. And there are conversations in the film that reveal that kind of like high level of celebratoriness. And I think in these 5 years, that if anything, we've gotten to a stage where in this country there's even more of this kind of tendency to tick boxes and to celebrate things on the surface while wanting to sweep under the carpet anything that might disrupt that sense of celebratoriness, even for those people jinke naam mein celebration ho raha hai. In this case, for example, the medical student who's cracked whatever aims, but might be suffering. That suffering within, in emotional terms or institutional lack of support that causes or triggers those sorts of problems, which are dealt with in very personal ways in the film. I wondered whether, we've had, since the film was made, you've had like a Rohit Vemula moment where some attention was drawn to this sort of lack of support for people who are not from very privileged backgrounds, caste-wise, class-wise, entering our campuses. I mean, do you think there's been any change in how we see these things in India since Placebo was made?
See, the thing is, I wouldn't know how to measure that change, because I think I kind of walked away from it all. Also, that's probably one of the reasons why I haven't made a film in so long, is that I needed to recover from what I had experienced, and there was no time to absorb and understand what had happened, what all of us had gone through in that time together. It took me years to even acknowledge a lot of things of how I was feeling and what we went through. Because, okay, the film finished in 2014 end, but then immediately afterwards, I was, the thing is, I was not prepared for what would happen once the film ends, right? Like, how do I bring it to the people here? So that battle was something which definitely took its toll on me. Like from 2014 end to September 2016, when the film came on Netflix, I already had come through a very intense experience of finishing this film, but it's almost like, okay, there's a strange parallel here, right? Like how before you get into AIMS or IIT, you're told, all you have to do is get in, right? But nobody tells you what happens afterwards. So that's the same thing which happened to me. When I finished the film, I realized, okay, the first step is like, you want to make a film which you yourself want to see, and have you done everything in your power to make that film? And we did that. But then what? So even I wasn't prepared for the next step, which was how do I bring the film to students, to people in India, right? And and it's a conversation which I have with one of my closest friends, and we were discussing within the independent film space where, let's say, there are no standardized structures to understand how does a film become a success, right? And clearly for independent films, it's never just monetary. It's the kind of impact or the kind of reach or the kind of following it gathers over years. And we were trying to unravel the question that is the film a success or not? Like, how do you even measure it? And for me, there's always a lingering sense of failure because most people still don't know about the film, in the sense I wanted to take it to medical colleges to sort of, I had these ambitions of like sort of
And
giving it to the community.
did that not
I had
happen?
no energy. No, because the thing is, I had no energy first to make the film and then to just like constantly email institutions and then beg to show the film. That is something I refuse to do.
Yeah.
In the sense that
It's a whole different job.
um,
I understand that.
it's a whole different job.
Except there's no one
And
else to do it but you. Yeah.
yeah, so after a point, for my own mental health and for my own sanity, I had to stop. So that's why I just put the film out for free. I'm like, it's out there. So some people discover it, and and it's interesting to read the kind of comments below on YouTube that give you an idea of what it does to people and how people sort of relate to it. So that's quite once a while I get a notification, and it's really funny to see it.
So
Because like I said, I've also forgotten that I it doesn't even feel like I made this film anymore. So but to answer your question, sorry, that was a big segue.
no worries at all.
Yeah,
Segues are the
I,
best.
I I I don't really know how the things have changed, because like I said, I just went inwards from there to figure out my own what did it all mean and what does it mean, like so I've sort of been dealing with a lot of the aftermaths in my own head.
What's the most interesting sort of comment you've got on YouTube? I unfortunately didn't know that it's on YouTube. I would have gone and looked up the comments before this conversation, but maybe you can tell us something.
Actually, it's maybe it's a sign of the times, but when I put it out there, the film had maybe what, like 10,000 views or something, and it was just lying there dead. Until one day, I started to get all these emails that so XYZ is subscribed to your channel. And I thought, okay, and there was a torrent of these emails, right? Like, so I'm like, what is happening? Like, what has something, I Googled, has something happened? Like,
Yeah.
is there some controversy suddenly? Like, what is happening? And then suddenly the film had like 90,000 views. And I was like, what? There is something going on, until a friend of mine, also a young filmmaker who runs a Facebook page. And so apparently he did a review on TikTok. And after watching that TikTok review, there was a torrent of viewership coming to the film. And the top comment is, who has come here after watching the TikTok review? So that's the comment, which is like maybe 500 times. And for me, that defines the context in which this film exists, and which is also partly a reason why I stopped making things. I just didn't understand things anymore. Like,
but this is, I mean, I can't speak to your reaction as a filmmaker, as a maybe filmmaker, but this is fascinating. This TikTok as the space in which this film might be. This is fascinating. Okay, I will just leave it there. It's fascinating.
I mean, it's you can't write this stuff up. Like, I wouldn't imagine this would be the reason one day people would watch the film. And yeah, it's something. There's something there.
There certainly is. You've got me totally like I'm tongue tied. I don't know what to do with this TikTok thing. But I have to say, people are watching it, and that is always good, I think. So maybe that what they say is true about things that you write or things that you make or things that you draw. You don't really own them, and yeah.
No, and it also set me on just thinking about intention, right? Like, do you hear a lot of children screaming?
A little bit.
Can you? Okay,
yeah.
That's fine.
Who are they?
Just kids downstairs.
So this is this where you live in Amsterdam, or is this
Yes.
yeah? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the idea of intention, and how, and maybe that's something, when you're young, you have all these ideas of what things mean and how much power you have, and what how you will drive things. So that a lot has changed for me in sort of just understanding how chaotic things are, and all your intentions. I mean, of course they're important, but how you intend things to be and how they eventually be, um, it's quite fascinating how that has turned out to be. And you know it's, yeah, I mean, if I sometimes logically think that, what would I think of somebody like a friend of mine who made a film, and a film which he made well, and then he just stopped doing it for 5 years, 6 years? What would I tell him? So when I look back, sometimes this gap almost feels like, what have I done? Like, so, but it's also because I've done it. It also feels, um, I don't know. It's a strange feeling.
Well, but you just said that like Placebo is as much Archana's film as yours, and so About Love, which was only 2019, which is not even a year
Oh
ago.
yeah, no, of course.
So there have been other things that you've been working on, and
Yes, yes. But yeah, that's more just me being there for support, and that's always gonna be there. Like, so we joke about it when About Love was done. Archu was like, "Now it's your turn," So it's almost like,
mehnat
so,
wala
like,
time kind of.
no pressure.
Yeah. So is there something that you're working on now, or is there even if it's not a film idea, is there something that you'd like to
Mm,
speak of?
yes. So I think 2016, I really got into the techno scene, and this also was something. So actually, I don't know if you. So my main interest in, I mean, you called me a documentary filmmaker, and then a part of me was like, no, don't do this, because actually my interest is horror and science fiction. And with Placebo, also with the visual language, I was trying to bring in elements, um, because yeah, I mean, it's my first film. I can do whatever I want in that sense, that I have the ability to play. Um, so I've been kind of, that's the space I've always been interested in this sort of fantasy, horror, science fiction, and trying to find a visual language which is not restrictive. And the closest I felt to that was in immersion in techno spaces, clubs in Berlin, or here in Amsterdam, or when I was traveling on the festival circuit. This is something which just, it was a complete, let's say, a U-turn from my previous life, where from 25 to 30 I was isolated, just kind of focusing on making Placebo and not really having a life around it. So it was also almost in a way to let some life in. And right now, that is the center of what I'm trying to sort of work with. And I'm still trying to find, I'm still not sort of restricting it to a point that this has to be a film or a documentary or a fiction film. Because in my research for techno, I saw a lot of non-fiction out there, which I feel is still not giving me what I'm looking for in sort of representation of an experience. So, for example, if Placebo was me giving shape to the idea of isolation and not being able to connect, then this would be the theme of transformation, of becoming, of transforming into something else, where obviously the science fiction and horror themes come in. So I'm still in very early stages of dealing with it, in the sense, but I'm not moving towards a project right now at all. So
it sounds fascinating. I hope you figure out the vocabulary, or whatever the form that's going to take. I don't know very much about rave at all, but I imagine that being in Amsterdam is a good place to be, to do more of this, or immerse yourself further in it.
I mean,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a step better from being in Delhi in terms of access to these spaces. But then I was lamenting the fact that, okay, so summertime is when most of these events happen, and now it's gone. Like, so the summer has been cancelled here.
Mm.
So
That's
now
true.
I have to update my ways of functioning as to how I go about it. So
Um, I to come back to placebo, I just wanted to ask you, why is it called placebo?
well, I would like to ask you, why do you think it's called placebo?
So, I mean, the literal meaning of placebo is a drug that, you know, um, that doesn't have, what's that word, is not actually efficacious in supposedly real physical terms, right? So it's about
Mhm.
believing that it's doing something for you or curing you.
Right,
So
right.
I guess I thought of it as medical school itself, maybe. I don't know. That's where I went.
Yes. I mean, we are 50%, actually 80% right, because the film takes place in a medical school, but it's this idea of you do this and everything will be fine,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, you have it already. So,
Yeah. So the thing we were talking about, the ticking of the box, that idea that we've reached here and it's done. Like now that you've
yeah, but
aced
I
this
would also make
exam.
it, yeah, but I would also make it that simplistic because
Yeah.
it's also about, there's another layer of belief,
Mm,
right? In the sense, you can take a pill
mm,
believing that it will cure you,
mm,
but it depends on what kind of belief you have and what are the possibilities of that belief. So it's not, yeah. So I mean,
mm.
maybe it's a really far-fetched association, but it kind of made sense to me.
One of the one of my favorite children's books as a child, obviously as a child, is a book by the woman more famous for writing The Railway Children. She's called E. Nesbit. And there's a book that's not much read of hers called The Enchanted Castle. And the thing that I remember being very, very struck by was that there's a ring in it. And, you know, it's all very self-reflexive magic. So there's this bunch of children, and some of the children think that the ring is magic, and other children are like very rationalist and saying, what rubbish, there's no such thing as magic, and of course this ring is not magic. And then, you know, one of the children who believes that the ring is magic, says that she's invisible, and then she becomes invisible. And then eventually you realize that the ring is magic when you believe that the ring is magic. So
Absolutely.
that's the, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you said that because pretty much that's the principle me and Archana make films on. Because on paper, like sometimes we joke about it. Like probably we're the only two filmmakers in India who made two feature film on handycams. You know, just going out there with a handycam, nothing else. That's where it begins. And then just to believe that it can become something which we can, you know, show on a big stage or get the best possible audiovisual experience. Yeah, we look back sometimes and it's a inside joke that just because we believe it can be done, it happens
Ah,
sometimes.
that's the best definition of magic, actually. Well, I think it's probably a good place to stop this conversation, at least on camera. So, thank
Sure.
you very much for talking to me about a film that is not top of your mind. I'm not sure we've done a very good job of correlating it to the present moment, but hopefully, it is still a fascinating film. I urge everyone who hasn't seen it to watch it. And thanks again, Abhay. Bye.
Thank you, Trisha.